subscribing to the channel. I post 2 times a week, on Monday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. I recommend using headphones if you would like to hear the gentle mic brushing. Now let's get right to tonight's case. Tonight we are traveling to Kansas. Shout out to all my friends in Kansas. This case took place in November of 2009, and it is the case of the Kahler family. So let me give you some background on Karen and Kraig Kahler. Let's start with Karen. She was 44 at the time of the crime. She was born on July 30th, 1965 in Topeka, Kansas. She graduated from Wichita High School South in 1983, and then she went on to Kansas State University, where she met Kraig Kahler, who she would ultimately marry, and we'll get to him in a moment. So they married in December of 1985, and they went on to have 3 children: Emily, Lauren, and Sean, who at the time of the crime would be 18, 16, and 10. Karen threw her all into being a mother and a homemaker. She was extremely devoted. But as she started spending more and more time focusing on her own personal health and fitness goals, she became interested in becoming a personal trainer. So she got a job doing just that at a local gym. And she also went back to school and began studying for a degree in health science from the University of Missouri. What was she doing in Missouri? Well, I'll get to that. So anyway, her husband, Kraig, his name was actually James Kraig Kahler, but he went by Kraig. He was born January 15th, 1963 in Topeka, Kansas. Graduated from high school in 1981 and went to college at Kansas State University, where he met his future wife, Karen. Now, he studied electrical engineering in college, and the first job that he got using that degree was at a nuclear power plant in Colorado. So the two of them moved to Colorado for his job. And later they moved again to Texas for his job. In 1999, he got a really good job, well-paying, well-respected. It was in Weatherford, Texas, as the director of the Public Utilities Department. Now, by 2008, he was still at that So 1985 to 2008. You do the math. That is 23 years, maybe 22 years, depending on months and everything. But okay, so they had been married for over 20 years, and he had a schedule for them to have relations, if you know what I mean. It was to be at 9 o'clock, 4 or 5 days a week. And she went along with it because, according to her sister, who spoke about it later, doing this would keep the peace between them as a couple, and if she didn't do it, then she would pay for it later. I can't say what that means, whether that would be she would pay for it physically, or if he would just be impossible, to live with. I'm not clear, but whatever it was, she didn't want to do it, and I think most of us realize that after 20 years of marriage, couples are not doing this 4 or 5 times a week, as a side note, okay? So, that summer, the summer of 2008, Kraig got himself an even better job than the one that he already had. And it was in Columbia, Missouri. He was to become the director of water and light for the city of Columbia. So the plan was he would move out there, set up the home, and his wife and the children would stay in Texas over the summer and then move in with him in the fall. So, right before he was about to leave, Karen, his wife, said to him that she had met a woman at the gym where she works. It was a co-worker named Sunny, a female co-worker. And she was asking him permission to experiment with a physical relationship with this woman. And when he was first asked, he was actually very happy about the idea, and he encouraged her to pursue it. It is unclear whether or not he ever physically participated with the two of them, but it seems like he believed that he would be. I'm not sure if he ever was. Maybe in the beginning. It's not written down anywhere whether or not they ever actually did anything as 3 people, if you know what I mean. But as it turned out, he changed his mind quite quickly about the whole thing when he realized that they were really just interested in each other and not in him. He was being pushed out of the picture, and this woman, Sunny, had become a threat to their marriage. But he figured, you know what? My wife and kids are moving to Missouri soon, and it'll put an end to this whole thing, so let's not worry. So in the fall of that year, 2008, the rest of the family moved to be with him in Columbia, Missouri. But the relationship between his wife and Sunny did not end. She continued to visit her. She would go back to Texas, or Sunny would come to Missouri. And on New Year's Eve, the family traveled back to Texas to go to a party. And this woman, Sunny, was there. shoving match. In January of 2009, Karen filed for divorce. And then in March of that year, Karen made a battery complaint against Kraig. Reportedly, they were together for some reason or other, and he went to hug her, but she didn't want him hugging her, and, well, he wouldn't stop hugging her. He wouldn't get off. And I guess she was fearful because I'm assuming she felt he was going to become violent. There's not a lot of information there as to what exactly went on. But anyway, he was at a city council meeting when the arrest warrant was served on him. And that was extremely embarrassing. And since he held public office, his arrest was widely publicized. So, right after that, Karen took the kids and they moved out of the house in Missouri. And it seemed that the two girls had sided with their mother against their father. But the son was still enjoying his relationship with his father. Now, when Kraig was at work, he spent all his time complaining about his marriage and how he couldn't understand what had gone wrong. He was such a good provider. He made so much money. It was something like $180,000 a year at that point. They had a beautiful house. He showed them photos. He showed his coworkers photos of his family and said, "Don't they look so happy? Like, what could have possibly gone wrong?" And his supervisor noticed that he was just completely and totally preoccupied with his own problems, and he was no longer able to function properly at his job. So in August of 2009, he was fired. So now there he is. No job, no wife. His kids not with him. His daughters are against him. He feels his life is a disaster, and it's not his fault as far as he's concerned. And his family is starting to get worried about his mental condition. His brother would later say that Kraig had said to him that he was going to go out in a, quote, blaze of glory, end quote. His father said Kraig's mother drove Sean to meet Karen in Topeka, where she picked up Sean and then brought him to the grandmother's house in Burlingame. So as I mentioned before, the date was Saturday, November 28th, 2009. And the grandmother's name was Dorothy White. And at her house were Karen, the mother, 44, Emily, the daughter, 18, Lauren, the other daughter, 16, and Sean, the son, 10 years old. Now, around 6 o'clock that evening, Kraig breaks in through the back door of Dorothy's house, walks into the kitchen where he sees Karen and Sean. He shoots Karen 2 times. He purposely does not harm Sean, and he heads out of the kitchen, at which point Sean ran out the back door to the neighbor's house and they called the police. But meanwhile, Kraig went on to shoot Dorothy, Emily, and Lauren, and then he took off. Around this time, the grandmother must have pressed the button on her life alert system, and 911 was contacted, probably through one of those intercoms. I am assuming, because they were able to pick up all the sounds in the house, and you could hear screaming, and somebody was saying, quote, "Somebody is coming to kill us, he's killing us, help, he's in the house," and gunfire could be heard. So, when the officers got there, he was gone, and they could not find him. But they found Karen on the kitchen floor, unconscious and barely breathing. Sadly, they found Emily, who had been shot twice and was dead, on the living room floor. They found Dorothy sitting in a chair. She had been shot in the abdomen, but she was conscious. And they heard somebody yelling faintly in the distance, and she was saying, quote, help me, I don't want to die." So the officer followed the sound of that voice and found Lauren. She had been shot twice, but she was conscious and she was having a lot of trouble breathing. She said to the officer, "I need air. I don't want to die. Make me alive." And he asked her who did this to her, and she said, "Kraig." She didn't say Dad. She said, "Kraig." And he said, "Who is Kraig?" And she said, "My father." Dorothy was also able to identify the shooter, and they were brought to the hospital White was 89. She was born on August 24th, 1920, in Burlingame, Kansas. She graduated from Burlingame High School in 1938. She was a homemaker, a mother, a grandmother, and a great-grandmother. She leaves behind 2 daughters, 1 son, a sister, 3 grandchildren, and 8 grandchildren. Okay, so back to the case. The morning after the murders, Kraig was found walking down a country road. He surrendered without incident, and the evidence was so overwhelming that he did not even try to deny what he had done. He was charged with capital murder and aggravated burglary for breaking into Dorothy's house. At the trial, the defense attempted to establish that the fact that Kraig had lost his job, his wife, and his family had caused him to snap, and that he was suffering from severe depression, and he had an obsessive, compulsive, narcissistic, and histrionic personality, and because of all this, he was incapable of forming the intent and premeditation required to establish this as a crime of capital murder. The defense presented testimony from Dr. Stephen Peterson, who was a forensic psychiatrist, and he testified that due to Kraig's mental condition, quote, his capacity to manage his own behavior had been severely degraded so that he couldn't refrain from doing what he did, end quote. But the prosecution came in with their own forensic psychiatrist, Dr. William Logan, who stated that he had interviewed Kraig and found that he was capable of forming the requisite intent and premeditation. And of course, the star witness for the prosecution was Sean, Kraig's son, who was now 12. So he was able to say what he had witnessed on the day of the murders. The jury convicted Kraig Kahler of capital murder in 2011, and he was sentenced to death. He has tried to appeal this sentence, but he has not been successful. And currently, he is still alive and in prison. He has never showed any signs of remorse or regret. He had stated that this was something that he had to do in order to save Sean from the clutches of his mother and Sonny. So he did it for the sake of his son. That doesn't really explain why he killed the 2 daughters, but there you have it. Custody of Sean was given to Kraig's parents, and at the end of the trial, as he was leaving the courtroom, Kraig said to his parents, quote, "Take care of Sean so he's not raised by a bunch of freaks," end quote. And that Why did all these people have to lose their lives? And then I say, Kraig was not the first man to lose it all. You know what I mean? It's very unfortunate when these things happen. He lost his wife, his kids, he lost his job. That is awful, and I get it. But what made him turn to murder? Why was that the solution? Well, I had said earlier in the video that he was so proud of his family, and it was his top priority. And obviously, when there was nothing left for him to be proud of anymore, his ego was crushed, and he just could not recover from that. He couldn't even pull himself together at work. Most of us will kind of push down all the hurt feelings that we have when it's time to do our job, right? You kind of push it to the back of your mind. You do what you have to do. And in fact, a lot of us will say, going to work actually helped me get my mind off my personal problems. But he couldn't do that. And like they said, he had all these personality disorders. Obsessive compulsive, narcissistic. So clearly this was the only solution that he could find, and it wasn't much of a solution because look where it got him. It got him in prison, and clearly he is not happy about sitting on death row because he has been trying everything he can to have that overturned and just have life in prison. Do I think it was premeditated? I do think so. Because he had no reason to go to Dorothy's house to begin with, and with a gun, he had an automatic weapon with him. So obviously, as soon as he headed over there, he knew what he was headed to do. And the fact that he went in, first thing he did was shoot his wife. He left his son alone on purpose because he did not want to kill him. And he went around the house and he killed all the females. And then he left. So he went there to do what he had planned on doing, and then he left. And he knew right from wrong because he didn't stick around. He made sure to get out before the police arrived. Now, do I think that he should have been sentenced to death? That's a tough question for me. I would say that if he had shown remorse, and that you could feel that it was true remorse, and that he wished he could take it back, I might be a little more likely to think that he maybe shouldn't get the death penalty. Maybe. I said maybe. Okay, maybe. But the fact that he never apologized for what he did, and he just clung to the statement that he did it for his son, that leads me to believe that this man is evil, pure evil. Yes, I know he has mental illnesses, I'm not disputing that. But that